There was a time before time, when the earth still remembered how to sing. Her voice flowed through every leaf and feather, every stream and stone, every heartbeat born beneath her sky. It was not the roar of oceans or the hush of moss that carried her song, but something more subtle, more sacred. A hum, a pulse, a memory that lived in the quiet between things. In those days, the land was not separate from its people. There were no words for nature or soul. For no one had yet forgotten they were the same. The world was not crowded with sharp corners or machines. It unfolded in curves and spirals, a living geometry that spoke in color, vibration, and the movement of wind. Trees did not grow alone. They grew in deep communion, their roots weaving into one another's dreams. Stones carried stories in their veins. Flowers opened not only for bees, but for song, for beauty, for laughter, for prayer. Some called this place Aelara, though no map ever marked it. Others called it the breath between stars. It was not hidden in space, but in memory. Folded softly into the layers of the world like a secret only silence could remember. The people of this land, if they could be called people, shimmered like morning mist. Some wore bodies of soft golden skin, others of gentle blue or translucent pearl. Their eyes were wide, not from fear, but from wonder. They did not speak as we do. They touched thoughts, shared dreams, danced meanings into the air. They fed on light, on beauty, on the radiance of being alive. A meal might be a sunrise, or the scent of blooming vines after rain. A feast was the hush before thunder. To dance among blossoms was not recreation, but invocation, a way to shape energy, to heal the weather, to awaken a sleeping stream. They moved in spirals and waves, gestures that spoke to the deep ley lines of the earth, to the breath of the sky. They were gardeners not only of plants, but of light and resonance, memory and future. The land responded. It sang back. In this forgotten world, the boundary between spirit and matter had not yet hardened. The trees had voices. The rivers remembered names. Even the wind was kin, and every creature, from the lowliest beetle to the gliding serpent of the sunlit cliffs, had its place in the luminous weaving. Time itself was different here. There were seasons, yes, but they were not clocks. They were songs. A migration of colors. A rhythm of stars and moods and breath. Each day was its own being, and each night a doorway. And yet, even here, within the perfect spiral of harmony, there stirred a knowing. A subtle ache. The kind you feel just before waking from a beautiful dream. It was not fear. It was longing. For even in the most radiant corners of the universe, something always yearns to become more. To remember. To discover. To choose. And so, somewhere within the crystalline valleys of that ancient land, on a day woven from lavender mist and birdsong, a child was born. Not the first, nor the last. But different. She would not only hear the earth's song. She would follow it into the unknown. Aelara was unlike the others, though no one said it aloud. In the village of Velarun, where homes were grown from the trunks of great song trees and the sky glowed lavender at dawn, most children fed on nectar light, or bathed in the shimmer pools to take in their daily nourishment. But Aelara, she never needed to. She ate with her eyes. She would sit for hours beneath a flowering tree, drinking in the color of petals, watching the slow unfurling of a bud, and her body would grow strong, her soul content. Where others absorbed the sun, she absorbed beauty. Even as an infant, she refused the glowing fruit milk offered by the village nourishes. Instead, she would reach out, wide-eyed, toward the light that filtered through crystal leaves. And she would hum, a low, wordless tone, that made the petals quiver as if they heard her. The elders watched, puzzled at first, then reverent. She remembers, whispered the oldest among them. Remembers what? Asked the others. But no one truly knew. Aelara lived in a round dwelling grown from the heart of a moon tree. Vines curled lovingly around the doorway, blooming only when she passed. Her days were filled with simple joys, collecting dew beads that sang, weaving sky ribbons into her braids, or dancing among pollen lights that drifted like lanterns through the air. But there was something else. At night, when others slept folded in soft leaf hammocks, Aelara would sit at the edge of the great listening pool, her feet in the water, eyes closed, heart open. She heard the songs, not sung by voices, but by rivers, stones, and wind. They called her. Not by name, but by feeling. Come, remember. Come to where the sky breathes through the bones of the earth. There is something you were meant to find. At first she thought it was her own mind, wandering. But one night, she spoke the whispers aloud. And the water beneath her rippled, glowing softly, and a flower bloomed from its depths that no one had ever seen before. It pulsed with light. Not like fire. Like memory. The next day, she asked her elder, Eluna, the keeper of wind dances. Eluna, she said quietly, have you ever felt the world asking something of you? Eluna studied her for a long time. Then she spoke, not in answer, but in song.
There are those who listen, and there are those who are listened to. But once in an age one is born who is both. They do not walk the spiral, they become the spiral.
And so it was that Aelara began to feel the pull. A strange gravity in her chest. Not sadness. Not fear. But longing. As if part of her had always known, this was not the end of her path. But only the beginning. The trees had always made sounds. Whispers of wind in their leaves, the low creaking of their ancient limbs, the rhythmic drip of dew onto moss. These were the forest's breath, its natural song. But one morning, the sounds changed. It happened not all at once, but in a slow unfolding, like a bud daring to bloom. Aelara was walking the twilight path, a silver-laced trail only visible at dawn, when she heard the first clear note. Not a sound made by leaf or wind, but something deeper. A tone. Resonant. Alive. She froze. It was coming from the oldest of trees, a towering spiral trunk called Elshi, whose roots were said to reach the dreams of the earth. Aelara approached in silence, hand over her heart, breath soft. As she neared, the note deepened, harmonized, and then, astonishingly, it shifted as she did, like the tree was singing in response to her movement. You are heard, the tone seemed to say. You are seen. She placed her hand on Elshi's bark. It was warm, pulsing faintly under her touch. She closed her eyes and let herself soften into stillness. And then, not with her ears but with her being, she heard it. Daughter of light, we remember you. The voice wasn't spoken. It was more like a knowing that bloomed behind her ribs, a chord that trembled through her bones. Aelara sat, back against the tree, and listened. Not for words. For movement. For vibration. The entire forest was shifting its rhythm, slowly, patiently, toward her. The trees taught not through instruction, but through presence. Their silence was not empty. It was full, of time, of breath, of knowing. When Aelara finally rose from Elshi's roots, something had changed inside her. She now understood that nature did not simply speak. It sang in layers. The roots sang in memory. The bark sang in touch. The leaves sang in vibration. And the space between the branches sang in possibility. That day, she began her first true practice. She returned to Elshi at dawn and dusk and sat without expectation. She mimicked the tree's breath, slow, anchored, spacious. She learned to match her heartbeat to the pulse of the trunk. With time, she discovered something remarkable. The tree changed its tone depending on her thoughts. If she came restless, the song turned sharp and high. If she came curious, it flowed in rich, rippling tones. If she arrived in wonder, still and wide like sky, it sang in chords that opened the crown of her spirit like petals in sun. She learned, too, that different trees held different medicines. One whispered stories of joy lost and regained. Another hummed with sorrow that sweetened over time. A young sapling sang only in questions, inviting her to wonder. One evening, as dusk colored the forest in indigo and soft flame, Aelara heard a sound above her, not a bird, not a branch, but a laugh. She looked up and saw a small, luminous being reclining on a high branch, legs swinging, eyes glowing with mischief. It was no villager, nor spirit. Something in between. It looked like a child, but its hair flowed upward like smoke and its hands shimmered faintly with light trails as it moved. It grinned down at her. "You really listen," it said, cocking its head. "Most of your kind forgot that long ago." Aelara stood carefully. "Who are you?" The being leapt lightly to the ground, silent as a falling feather. "Call me Kyo," it said. "I'm a listener." Well, was. Before the listening fell asleep. Aelara frowned. "You mean, others used to hear the trees too?" Kyo smiled, but there was sadness in it. Everyone used to hear. Even the rocks sang, once. But then came the forgetting. Aelara felt a shiver at the word. The forgetting? Kyo crouched and drew a spiral in the soil. "It starts slowly," he said. "A song missed here, a root ignored there. Until people no longer hear the earth at all. Only their own echoes." He looked up, eyes gleaming. "But you're different. You're starting to remember." That night, Kyo taught her a breath, not to fill her lungs, but to open her skin. "Breathe through your soles," he said. "Breathe through the crown. Breathe not just air, but pattern." She stood barefoot beneath the stars. Inhale, drawing in the scent of bark and shadow. Exhale, letting her breath become wind. Soon, her body began to hum. Aelara could feel the pulse of the stars above her, mirrored by the pulse of the roots below. And for the first time, she realized she was not standing on the earth. She was standing within her. In the following days, the trees sang more clearly. And so did the rivers. And the stones. And even the silence between birdsong. Aelara's heart stretched wider each day. But so too did the ache, the quiet, persistent sense that something was missing. That something had been lost, and that her soul was tied to its finding. One night, Kyo whispered in her ear as she drifted off. "The world is calling you, little spiral. Not because it needs saving, but because it remembers what you are." The sky above Velarun was not like the sky in other lands. At night, it turned not black, but a deep, pulsing indigo laced with flowing rivers of starlight, visible currents, like silver serpents weaving slowly across the heavens. The villagers said these were the breath streams of the great dreamer, the one who sang the world into being. Most admired them from below. But Aelara had always felt drawn upward. There was one place, the Wisping Cliffs, where the earth dropped away into a sea of mist, and the stars felt almost close enough to brush with your fingers. No one climbed them. The cliffs were known to stir strange awakenings in the soul. Some returned in silence, changed forever. Others never returned at all. But Aelara could not resist the pull. Not anymore. She began her journey before dawn, slipping away from her moontree home with nothing but a cloak of woven light threads, her bare feet, and a glowing stone gifted by Elshi, one that pulsed gently whenever she listened deeply. Kyo met her at the edge of the forest. "You're really going," he said, his eyes wide, unreadable. She nodded. "I need to see." He didn't stop her. He only placed a tiny feather behind her ear. "If the sky dances with you," he said, "don't forget to answer back." And then he was gone. The climb was harder than she'd imagined. The path was narrow and wrapped in mist, as if the mountain didn't want to be seen. Vines curled toward her, not to trap but to test, soft brushes against her thoughts, her will, her fears. Each step higher was a step inward. She saw things. Not with her eyes, but with whatever part of her remembered being more than a body. A spiral of flame and stillness dancing together. A child's hand reaching for starlight inside a cradle of stone. A woman made of wind weeping over a lake that mirrored the moon's face. None of it made sense. All of it felt true. At last, she reached the summit. The wisping cliffs. The edge of the sky. It was silent, unnaturally so, and vast. Before her lay a blanket of mist stretching to forever, lit from beneath by soft, golden light. Above, the breath streams danced, pulsing gently like the veins of the cosmos. She stood alone on a stone platform worn smooth by time, and suddenly her heart began to race. Not with fear, but with knowing. This was the place the river song spoke of. This was where the air was thin enough to remember. She felt it begin in her feet, a tingling, like the earth was breathing into her. Without thinking, Aelara moved. She raised her arms, let her breath become rhythm, her fingertips become flight. She twirled, slow at first, then faster, not with effort, but with release. The wind gathered around her. Her hair lifted like the flame of a candle. As she danced, the mist rose. It coiled around her in spirals, shimmered with colors she'd never seen, and lifted her, ever so slightly, from the stone. Her feet left the ground, her body suspended in breath and rhythm. Above her, the sky responded. The rivers of starlight shifted direction, forming a pattern, not random, not chaotic. A spiral. The same as her mark. And then, in a flash of clear stillness, she heard it. You are the remembering. The voice came from within and without, sky, wind, blood, stars. What was broken in forgetting? You were born to restore in motion. Dance the bridges. Sing the lines. We are waiting. The wind rushed downward like a sigh. The mist fell away. Aelara dropped softly to her knees, gasping, laughing, crying without tears. Her arms shook, her skin glowed, and deep inside her, something ancient and fragile finally opened, like the last petal of a sleeping blossom unfolding to morning light. The stone beneath her cracked, not with destruction, but with memory. A light spiraled out from the break, hovering in the air before her. It was a seed. Warm. Alive. Humming. She held it in her palm, and it pulsed once in greeting. By the time she descended the mountain, the sun was rising behind her, painting the forest in gold and rose. The trees leaned toward her, brushing her shoulders with their leaves. The sky was quieter now, as if it had spoken and could rest. Kyo waited for her at the base of the path. He took one look at her glowing skin, her wide, sky-bright eyes, the seed in her hand, and he smiled. Well then, he said, bowing slightly. I suppose the listening has truly begun again. She had heard the calling. She had answered with motion, with breath, with her entire being. But she had also awoken something much older than herself. And far beyond the bounds of her village. The seed pulsed in her palm. The spiral had only just begun. Aelara stood at the edge of her village. Behind her, Elshi's singing bark. Elshi is the oldest of trees, a towering spiral trunk, the laughing children who danced with wind, the night fires where elders told stories older than language. Before her, an ocean of green, the living forest, shifting, breathing, utterly unknown. There were no maps. There were no paths. Only a soft humming in her bones, and the seed of light pulsing gently in her palm. It whispered no direction, only presence. No command, only invitation. The forest does not unfold for the feet, Kyo had told her that morning, solemn for once. It unfolds for the listening heart. So she stepped into the trees. The first thing she noticed was how aware it all was. The leaves didn't rustle at random, they sighed when she passed. Roots shifted just slightly, as if to cradle or test her steps. A soft mist trailed her like a curious animal. She touched a flower and it opened, not toward sunlight, but toward her. It sang a single tone into her palm before curling closed. It was a note of direction. A moment of clarity. She began to follow the tones. Not with her ears, but with her whole body. The forest became her compass, and the song a kind of invisible ink, a map drawn in feeling. She walked until the sun tilted toward its sleep, and the trees thinned into a wide clearing of high grasses, flickering with soft motes of gold. The air was suddenly charged, not dangerous, but electric, like thunder was waiting. And then the wind began to dance. It rose in spirals, gathering dust and light, shaping itself into a swirling form, not quite human, not quite cloud, glowing faintly with threads of starlight that traced its body in constellations. It spoke with no mouth. Its voice was felt in the ribcage. Child who listens. Do you know what you carry? Aelara bowed instinctively. A seed, she said. Given from the sky. More than that, the guardian breathed, its wind body shifting. You carry remembering. It lifted a tendril of light and touched her brow. Her mind opened like a 1,000-windowed room. She saw her people dancing in a spiral, their footprints forming patterns on the ground. A vast tree split down the middle by a scream no one could remember. A star falling into a pool of stillness, weeping light as it sank. The images vanished. To carry light is not to banish shadow, said the guardian. It is to remember that they danced together. Then it placed something in her hand, a single strand of wind, now solidified into silver thread. For when you must tie spirit to form, it said. You'll know when. And just like that, the wind was wind again. The path grew steeper after that. Hills rose like sleeping giants, and the forest thinned into rocky plains. In a valley cradled between two tall ridges, she found a great boulder ringed with mushrooms and lichen, humming faintly. When she placed her hand on it, it spoke. Not in words, in tone, deep and resonant, like a drum made of mountain. From a crack in the stone stepped an old figure, cloaked in moss, with eyes like polished agate. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. You hear, but do you resonate? She didn't understand. So he sang, a deep, earthy tone that made the stone itself tremble. Birds fell silent. A pool nearby shifted its color. Her chest vibrated in response. He placed her hands on the stone. Now you. Aelara tried. At first, only a whisper. Then a low sound rose from her belly, deeper than breath, older than voice. She felt it awaken something under the surface of everything. The stone cracked, and flowers bloomed from it. The old singer smiled. Mountains are not still. They are sleeping songs. When you remember your root, you can call them to rise. He gave her a crystal shard from the heart of the stone. It hummed with the same tone as her seed. One day, you'll need to awaken the land beneath your feet, he said. You'll know when. At last, she descended into a deep forest glade. There, nestled among hanging moss and whispering reeds, was a still, glassy pool that reflected no trees, no sky, only the one who gazed in. As she knelt to look, her own face shimmered, then changed. She saw herself as a child, laughing. Then old, wise-eyed. Then weeping in a strange place she'd never seen. Then, stillness. A voice rose from the center of the pool. Feminine, ageless. Breath is not for survival. Aelara looked up. A figure stood on the water, as if it were stone. She wore robes of mist and stars, her eyes the color of first light. Breath is a door, the being said. And silence is the key. She taught Aelara to breathe not in, not out, but through. Through thought. Through fear. Through illusion. As Aelara practiced, the pool changed, no longer reflecting form, but energy. She saw her aura, glowing with gold, but veined with pale distortions. Tiny knots of forgetting, pain, doubt. She panicked. Be still, said the being. Don't fix. Don't fight. Just see. So Aelara sat. And slowly, as breath wove silence into every knot, the distortions loosened. Some unraveled. Some wept. Some pulsed once and faded. Healing begins not in power, the woman said, but in presence. Before vanishing, she gave Aelara a gift, a single drop of water sealed in a pearl of stillness. When the world shakes, and you forget your breath, touch this, and remember the still point beneath all storms. That evening, Aelara camped beside a tree whose bark whispered lullabies. She held the 3 gifts in her lap. The silver thread of wind. The crystal shard of mountain. The pearl of stillness. And the seed, still glowing, still silent. She realized then, she was not collecting objects. She was weaving a language, one that nature remembered, and humans had forgotten. And somewhere out there, the distortion, the great forgetting, was still deepening. But so, too, was her path. The forest changed. Not suddenly, but like a memory slipping away. The flowers no longer opened at her touch. The trees still breathed, but their breath was shallow. The tones of guidance were gone. In their place, a soft, trembling hum that wavered just out of rhythm, like a heartbeat that had forgotten its purpose. Aelara walked slowly now. Even the seed in her hand pulsed more dimly. The air thickened with a strange heaviness. It wasn't fear, not exactly, but a weight. A sadness that didn't feel like hers, yet clung to her skin. Then she reached the edge. Before her lay a vast valley. Wide, sunless, carved by time into jagged stone and broken trees. Fogs clung to the cliffs like old wounds. The wind here didn't sing, it whispered things it didn't mean to say. And woven into all of it, echoes. Not just sound. Emotional echoes. Regret. Anger. Loneliness. They moved like ghosts, not seen, but felt. When she stepped down into the first slope of the valley, they pressed gently against her heart like hands testing the cracks in a bowl. She had been warned that some lands held residual memory. But this place remembered pain. And it was still singing it. She passed twisted stones that looked like faces. One wept. Another laughed. Some gnashed teeth at nothing. The valley's hum rose and fell with her emotions, louder when she felt unsure, silent when she remembered to breathe. She tried to hum the tones Elsie had taught her. They were swallowed. You don't belong here, a voice whispered from the fog. You think beauty can mend what was broken here? You left your people to chase echoes. They weren't real voices. But they were real thoughts. Her thoughts, amplified, distorted, returned. That was the echo. The valley didn't speak, it reflected. And now it was playing back everything Aelara had tried to silence inside herself. She found a pool, black as obsidian, in a hollow between 2 shattered trees. When she knelt to look inside, she saw herself. But not as she was. Her eyes were dim. Her seed had cracked. Her skin was ash. She tried to look away, but the image pulled her in. She saw herself failing. Wandering forever. Speaking words of light to beings who laughed in her face. She saw herself forgotten. Alone. She collapsed beside the water, breath ragged, heart thudding. You were never the one, the reflection said. The seed chose wrong. Her hand found her satchel. The pearl. She gripped it. No spell. No chant. Just the breath. In. Out. Through. Not to silence the pain, but to be with it, without flinching. Without judgment. The breath became her anchor. The valley's echo wavered. Her reflection in the water flickered, then faded, replaced by her real face, tear-streaked but clear. The distortion broke. She had not banished it. She had met it. And she had stayed. As she stood, the fog shifted. The wind softened. A single flower bloomed beside the black pool, pale blue, like memory. A tone rose from it. Not bright, but real, a grounded harmony. The first she'd heard in this place. She hummed with it. And the valley listened. Stone faces relaxed. The humming changed. It didn't vanish, but it aligned. She looked up. The cliffs ahead no longer felt like teeth, but steps. Near the far edge of the valley, she met someone, or something. A hunched figure of woven bark and cracked crystal, leaning against a broken obelisk. It looked up with eyes like rain-soaked coal. "You heard it, didn't you?" it rasped. "You didn't run from your own echo." Aelara nodded. "I listened." The being sighed, and with it, the wind moved through the valley in a way it hadn't in ages. "Then you are ready for the real sound. The one beneath all noise. The tone that never left, only got buried." He gave her a piece of obsidian, shaped like a small ear. "Not for hearing with," he said. "For remembering that you already know. You'll need it when the silence turns on itself." That night, she didn't leave the valley. She built a small fire of glowing reeds and sat in the softest place she could find, beside the flower that bloomed from sorrow. She sang to it. Not to heal. Not to fix. But to witness. And somewhere, deep in the roots of the valley, something ancient exhaled, and the echo grew a little quieter. The valley was behind her. Yet it moved with her, not like a shadow, but like a quiet companion. She had learned that not all sorrow needed to be healed. Some was meant to be held, and seen, and sung to softly. But as Aelara walked deeper into the woods beyond the valley's rim, she began to notice something off. Not loud. Not sharp. Just wrong. The forest still looked alive. The leaves still shimmered. But something beneath the beauty had changed. Aelara passed a tree whose blossoms glowed blue, but when she touched them, they cracked like glass. She knelt by a stream that sparkled with golden light, but the water tasted bitter and dry. The wind sang, but the song was empty, like a hollow shell of something once true. She paused. The seed in her palm, once pulsing with warmth, now flickered erratically. The obsidian ear in her pouch vibrated gently, like a quiet warning. "This is not distortion," she whispered aloud. "It's imitation." Ahead, the trees changed again, tall and silver-barked, with no leaves. Their trunks were smooth, almost mirror-like. But the reflections they showed weren't hers. In each surface, Aelara saw versions of herself. One wore a crown and walked with hundreds behind her, praised and perfect. One sat alone in a crystal palace, the world outside silent and still. One knelt weeping beside a shattered village, begging for a voice to return. Each version looked at her. Each whispered, "Choose me. I'm the true one. The others are just stories." She stepped away. Her breath grew shallow. The forest began to bend around her, trees warping, light twisting. Her mind swam with possibilities. Had she imagined the seed? Had her whole journey been a memory someone else planted? Was she chasing a path she'd already lost? She fell to her knees. The mirrors crowded in. Aelara forgot. Not everything, but enough. The songs, the lessons, the feel of Elshi's bark under her hand. The old stone singer's laughter. The pool of stillness. Gone, or hidden beneath layers of fog that seemed to rise from inside her own chest. And then, the worst part, the silence didn't help this time. She reached for breath, but it scattered. She hummed the forest tones, but they came back broken. Her seed was silent. The crystal had lost its glow. And still, the mirrored self surrounded her. "You want the truth?" one asked sweetly. "There isn't one. Only reflections polished well enough to believe in." She began to cry. Not loudly. just a sound like leaves wilting in the dark. That was when the ground gave way. She didn't fall far, only a few feet, but it felt like a drop into something deeper than earth. She landed on soft moss. Or was it ash? The air was still. Heavy. Faintly luminous, but colorless, like memory seen through old water. She stood slowly. Around her, pillars of root and stone, curved and carved with symbols half erased. The light came not from above, but within the walls, soft pulses of amber and violet. This was not the forest. This was beneath it. She wandered slowly. Shapes moved in the mist, not hostile, not welcoming. Just curious. They emerged from the root pillars, beings like her, but not. Tall and smooth-skinned, eyes deep as caves, skin shaded with gray-blue light. Each moved slowly, as if the weight of the air pressed on them. One approached. Its voice was neither male nor female, but soft and deeply sad. "You come from the world above? The one that forgot us?" Aelara blinked. "I don't know what I remember anymore." The being studied her. "Then you are ready." It touched her brow with one long finger. Her heart opened, not in radiance, but in ache. She saw them, Lemurian kin, once light-bearers, who turned inward when the great dissonance came. Who folded in on themselves to survive. Who traded clarity for depth. Who became heavy, not in form, but in feeling. They weren't evil. They were the ones who held the memories too sharp for the upper world. The ones who did not forget. "You call it darkness," said the being. "But it is only the part of the song where breath is held." Aelara wept again. This time, the tears tasted of remembering. Before she left, the beings gave her something, not a tool, but a gesture. They taught her emotion, a spiral movement with the hand over the heart, followed by a downward breath. It didn't look like anything. But when she tried it, she felt the fog inside her begin to shift. "When your path shatters," they said, "don't look forward. Don't look back. Spiral inward. Listen there. And the real light will find you." She climbed back to the surface. But the forest was no longer whole. The mist had spread. Not fog, but a kind of energy that blurred vision, memory, and feeling. Some trees had gone still. Some flowers sang false songs. The river near her village was clouded. The seed in her hand glowed again, but this time, its rhythm was urgent. And she knew. The distortion wasn't just waiting. It was growing. And she was its next test. She dreamed of rain that sang like birds. She dreamed of flowers weeping light. She dreamed of her mother's voice, though she had no memory of her mother. And when Aelara woke, the seed was burning. Not with fire. With music. But the melody was broken. She held the seed to her ear. Its hum was frantic, pulsing with a rhythm that didn't quite resolve. Like a sentence left unfinished. Like breath held too long. She tried to hum with it, but every time she got close to matching it, the tone fractured. Her voice split into two. Then three. Then silence. She tried to speak, but the silence held. She tried to dance, but the ground resisted. Even the trees had turned away, their branches curled inward as though ashamed. Something in the world, and in her, had come undone. In the hours that followed, or was it days? Aelara wandered. She found a grove shaped like a spiral shell, each step downward echoing with ghost notes of long-lost chants. At the center, a platform of crystal, covered in small markings that shimmered like music frozen into stone. She recognized them. Not from memory. From within. These were the symbols she'd seen long ago, drawn by elders in her childhood dreams, glyphs that moved when you watched them with your heart, not your eyes. She sat. The seed pulsed. She pressed it into the crystal. Nothing happened. Then she cried. It wasn't a dramatic cry. No lightning. No thunder. Just one sound. Why? She wasn't asking the forest. She wasn't asking the sky. She was asking herself. Why did you need to leave? Why couldn't you be content with the dances and the flowers and the wind? Why did you think you were chosen? And the answer came, not from words, but from within. Because part of you knew something had been forgotten. And part of you was born to remember it. But she couldn't. She couldn't remember. The crystal cracked. Not the platform, the seed. A soft shatter. A breathless gasp. A pulse of cold and light. And from within the seed, something slid out, a thin thread of pure sound. Shimmering. Slippery. Alive. It slithered across the stone like a ribbon of song looking for its missing verses. It found a groove in the center of the spiral, sank into it, and disappeared. And suddenly, the ground beneath her split, not into chaos, but into memory. A rift opened below, wide and slow, not violent, but inevitable. She fell. Not into darkness. Into music. She landed in a chamber that had no walls. No floor. No sky. Only sound and space. Somewhere, voices sang, not words, but intentions. Frequencies with meaning. Emotions wrapped in tone. One part of her heard a memory of the world before her world, a golden shore where beings wove light into language. A sphere of harmony, where everything known was shared through resonance. No lies. No fear. Only knowing. But one of those beings had stepped out of harmony, not in anger, but in curiosity. That one began to bend the tone. To see what would happen. The first disharmony was born. And from it, individuality. And from that, pain. Art. Fear. Choice. The song was split. And so were the people. Aelara stood in the space between. The voices sang still. But now, one of them was hers. And now, she understood. She had been looking for the original tone. But she was not meant to restore it to perfection. She was meant to bring harmony into the imperfection. To carry the song as it was now, fragmented and beautiful. To be the space where broken melodies could resonate again. She raised her hands. Not to control. To join. She began to sing, not one note, but many. Discordant. Honest. Full. The space wept light. And from it, something rose. Not the first seed. A new one. Born not from remembering the past, but from accepting the present. It floated into her hands, small, golden, and faintly green at the center. She knew what it was. The memory of harmony, not as it was, but as it could be again. It pulsed with warmth. And when she looked around, the void was gone. She stood at the edge of the misted forest once more. Only now, she wasn't lost. She was becoming the bridge. She stepped barefoot onto the circle of stone. The wind moved through her hair, and the windstone hummed at her belt. The breath she took echoed the stillness taught by the being in the pool. The note of the mountain stirred low in her chest. The white gold petal warmed in her hand. And behind it all, the whispering leaf, not seen, not touched, but present, still taught her how to listen. She was not carrying gifts. She was the song that had woven them all. The forest had changed. Or perhaps it hadn't, not truly. Perhaps Aelara had. When she stepped once more onto the mossy path between the whispering trees, she no longer strained to hear them. She felt them. Even those that had gone still. Even the ones humming false tones. All were part of the same great song. Some just needed a reminder. And so did she. The new seed glowed not with urgency, but with gentle warmth, as if breathing in rhythm with her heart. It didn't instruct her. It didn't flash. It simply resonated. And Aelara remembered something the beings in the Underrealm had said. When your path shatters, spiral inward. And the real light will find you. So she stopped walking. She turned her palms outward. She stepped into stillness. And she let the movement begin. She stepped into the stillness of the broken clearing. In her hand, the white gold petal shimmered, but more than that began to stir. The crystal shard of mountain, long quiet at her heart, began to sing, low and deep, the note of her true name. And the silver thread of wind, wound around her wrist since the day she left the Guardian, lifted into the air, catching the breath of the land like a harp string. They were not tools. They were remembrances. She had become the place where they all met. The first motion was not grand. Not dramatic. It was a tilt of the head, toward a golden leaf falling from a branch. A soft turn of her wrist, as if cupping water from a sacred pool. A slow spiral of the hips, echoing the movement of vines climbing sunlight. The forest noticed. Not with eyes. With presence. The wind leaned in. The birds fell silent, not out of fear, but reverence. The cracked flowers began to uncurl. Aelara continued. Her arms moved like the wings of birds not yet born. Her spine rolled like the river remembering joy. Her feet traced patterns into the earth, echoing the ancient glyphs beneath her dreams. And the song began. Not from her lips, but from the land itself. It began in the roots, a low hum, like laughter and sorrow braided together. Then the stones joined in, soft percussion beneath the melody. The mist began to rise, not as shadow, but as transformation. From the trunks of the trees came a sound like old memories awakening. And above it all, a note like a thread of sunlight pierced through cloud. Aelara was not performing. She was remembering on behalf of the world. And the world, slowly, was remembering with her. As she danced, she wept. Not out of grief. Out of recognition. Each movement was a meeting. A bow to the part of her that had feared she was not enough. A spin for the child who once heard whispers from rivers. A reach for the mothers and fathers of light who had sung before forgetting. A fall to the knees for the land that had held her when she was lost. The tears that fell weren't hers alone. Where they touched the earth, flowers bloomed. Where her bare feet struck the ground, light coiled up like morning mist. The forest sang in layers, in colors, in tones too old for language. As the final motion came, a slow, open gesture of the hands lifting skyward, Aelara felt the breath of the wind carry her heartbeat across dimensions. The veil between what is seen and unseen thinned. She saw the spirits of stone and sap. She felt the hum of the guardians of air and echo. She saw the old Lemurian beings in the Underrealm, lifting their heavy heads, a smile, slow and full, rising on their lips. She was no longer only Aelara. She was the seeker, the singer, the danced memory of harmony walking in form. And the seed, now glowing bright green and gold, rose from her hands and hung in the air. It pulsed once, twice, and then, with a soft sound like a bell echoing through rain, it dissolved into a wave of light, sweeping gently through the forest. Where it touched, the cracked blossoms healed. The rivers cleared. The mirrored trees turned their faces toward the sun. Aelara stood still. Sweating. Breathing. Crying. But full. The forest was not fully healed. There were still shadows. But the song had returned. And more than that, a path was opening, beyond the edges of what she had ever imagined. Not home. Something beyond home. She would rest. But not for long. There was one more place she had to go. The sky was neither day nor night. A soft silver-blue dome stretched overhead, studded with pale stars that pulsed like memories. Aelara stood at the edge of a glade she did not recognize, though her soul stirred with familiarity. Here, gravity seemed unsure of itself. Petals floated upward. Stones hummed beneath her feet. The trees leaned inward, toward a center that pulled at her chest more than her limbs. And there, at the heart of the space, suspended just above the earth, stood the temple between worlds. It did not appear all at once. First, she saw its suggestion, a shimmer in the air, like heat rising from sacred ground. Then came sound, a low, thrumming tone that matched the rhythm of her breath. Next, scent, warm cedar, deep earth, wild honey. Finally, shape, not made of stone or wood, but of intent. An arching dome of woven frequencies, its walls translucent like water, its pillars formed from braided beams of light and echo. As she stepped closer, it welcomed her. Not with words, but with remembrance. No door barred her path. No gate required a key. Her presence was the offering. As she stepped beneath the archway, the atmosphere shifted. Time stilled. Breath deepened. The sound of her own heartbeat layered with another pulse, ancient, slow, eternal. The space inside was vast and intimate at once. At its center hovered a pool, still and black as obsidian, yet filled with stars that flickered just beneath its surface. Surrounding it, concentric rings of glyphs gently turned, each glowing softly, words of a language not meant to be spoken, only understood. Aelara stepped to the edge. The pool was a mirror. But not of form. Of truth. She saw herself, not as she appeared, but as she had been across all her lives, a spiral of light and experience, wounds and wisdom, joy and loss and rebirth. She saw herself as a child in the village. As a dancer beneath the moons. As the one who doubted. As the one who fell. As the one who sang through the fracture. But then, she saw more. She saw others. Spirits of wind and stone. Faces of beings she had never met, yet recognized as kin. Hands reaching toward her from other realms, other moments, weaving together threads of shared intention. She was not alone in the remembering. All who had ever longed to heal, to reweave, to return to wholeness, they were part of the song too. And through the pool, they all touched. Not as separate souls, but as facets of the same great light. From the center of the pool, a column of light rose. It curved, slow and serpentine, and coiled above her like a luminous vine, flowering with symbols that bloomed and faded in sequence. One by one, the glyphs entered her heart. Not carved, not branded, woven in. Each one was a lesson. A remembering. A promise. That her voice mattered. That silence was sacred. That the world could break and still hold beauty. That the new earth would be woven not by returning to the old, but by carrying its memory into the becoming. She knelt. Not in worship, in reverence. The temple did not demand obedience. It invited witnessing. Aelara closed her eyes. She felt herself dissolve into breath. She became the space between footsteps. The hush before dawn. The moment before a leaf falls. And in that in-between, she felt it. The new tone rising. Not from the heavens. Not from the ground. From within. A song that was not the first, and not the last. But hers. And it was enough. When she opened her eyes, the temple was gone. But its echo thrummed in her blood. In her hands was no seed. Only a single petal, white gold, faintly glowing, shaped like a spiral. She tucked it into her hair. The trees around her sighed in relief. Somewhere far off, the river laughed again. And ahead of her, through the forest, came voices. Others. She was no longer the only one who remembered. The path home was not the same. It curved through groves that shimmered with awareness, where the wind now carried new colors. Trees once asleep stirred gently, as if stretching after a long dream. Flowers leaned toward her with quiet joy. The land remembered her. But even more, the land remembered itself. And yet, Aelara felt no pride. No claim. Only belonging. She walked barefoot, the white gold petals still in her hair, the echo of the temple humming low and constant in her chest. She carried no bundle, no relics, no tools, only the thread of tone inside her breath. And that was enough. The village rose beyond the hill, just as she had left it, and yet utterly changed. Children ran barefoot among sun-touched fields, laughing not just with delight, but with recognition. Elders sat beneath the wind tree, their palms cupped, eyes closed, lips moving slowly, as if tasting forgotten names on their tongues. The river had changed pitch. It sang brighter. It welcomed. The homes, built from woven branches, softened clay, polished shell, now had vines curling along their edges in deliberate spirals, as if the plants themselves had remembered ancient patterns. Aelara paused before entering. And from the breeze came a whisper. "You are not returning. You are beginning." As her feet touched the edge of the circle of dancers, silence fell. Not out of fear, but in recognition. They had dreamed her, though they did not know it. They had longed for her song, though they'd forgotten what song was. And she, without speaking, stepped into the center. No one asked for a name. No one asked where she had been. They simply watched as she reached toward the sky with one hand, toward the soil with the other, and began to move. Her dance was slow, at first. It was not the same as before. It was quieter, rounder, deeper. The movements were woven with silence. And as she danced, the children leaned forward. The elders began to hum, a low, ancient vibration that had lived beneath their skin all along. Mothers pressed palms to the ground. Fathers closed their eyes and remembered dreams they'd buried. And the first song began, again. Not all was perfect. Some still lived in forgetfulness. There were cracks, there were sorrows. But the song moved between those spaces now, not to fix, but to fill. In the days that followed, the village became more than a village. It became a living memory. Not of a golden age gone by, but of a truth returned. Aelara taught not by instruction, but by invitation. Children learned to read the breath of the wind and the tilt of shadows. Some discovered they could shape tone into healing, not by command, but by listening. Others danced their own dances, awkward, joyful, true. The gardens bloomed not only with food, but with color, with scent, with beauty that fed the heart. And when someone wept, as they sometimes did, the village gathered around them. They didn't speak. They danced. She did not become a queen. She did not become a priestess. She became a center, not above, but within. People called her many things. Some whispered she was from the stars. Some called her the girl who sang the forest back to life. But when asked her name, she only smiled and said, "Aelara." Just Aelara. And that was more than enough. One twilight, as the sun stretched golden threads across the horizon, Aelara stood once more at the edge of the village. She watched the children dance with the wind. She saw the elders drawing spirals in the earth. And she felt it, the tone again. Rising not from her, but from them. From the land. From the stillness between things. And she knew. Her story had ended. But the song had only just begun. Years later, a child walking alone by the river would find a single white gold petal caught in the reeds. She would hold it to her ear like a shell. And she would hear, not ocean, but the echo of a dance. And a voice, not hers, and yet deeply hers, would whisper, "Remember. You are not separate. You are the song." The child would smile. And begin to hum. In time, no one remembered exactly when Aelara had arrived, or even when she had danced the first song again. They only remembered how things began to listen differently after her. How the winds no longer wandered, but conversed. How the waters shaped stories into eddies and foam. How dreams returned to people who had forgotten how to receive them. In every village touched by her steps, or those who learned from her, someone would eventually be called. Not a priest. Not a teacher. But a weaver. A being who did not lead from above, but helped keep the web of life singing, reminding rivers of their names, and people how to grieve and bloom in the same breath. Though Aelara herself no longer walked among them, she was still felt. In the silence between songs. In the hush before rain falls. In the first breath of a newborn child. And somewhere, perhaps only in the heart, the world would whisper. Sing, little light. The dance is still unfolding.